Hi folks, my name is Robin Prasad. Today I will be giving you an overview of what is a webinar, as well as how to use a webinar. Before we start, I would like to ask participants who have logged in for this webinar a few simple questions. If you did not get the link for the webinar or are new to this whole process, don't worry. For those that are logged in, I've already created one question, and it's asking you if you enjoy technology. You can simply answer yes, no, maybe, and here there's no vote currently. I will add 2 more survey questions. The first one, for those that are logged in, to be answered will be, have you ever created a webinar? It will be simply a yes and no question. I'm going to open it up for you to see. My last survey question will be, have you used Adobe Connect? This will also be a yes or no answer. And I will open it up for you to see if you're logged in. We have one participant that answered the questions to the survey. And I know this by looking at one here, and one here. Unfortunately, we only had one person that entered today's session. For those of you that did not enter the live session today, think about how you would have answered these questions. Now we look at today's agenda. The first thing on our list is to talk about the essentials of what is a webinar and what makes a successful webinar. Number 2 on the list is how to set up your webinar with Adobe Connect. Number 3, demonstrate and understand the functions and tools to support and build a successful webinar in Adobe Connect. And number 4, a summary of the top 10 things to consider when making your own webinar. As for our table of contents, we'll be going over a few different things. Number 1, what is a webinar slideshow? Number 2, logging in and the guest login. Number 3, how to create a meeting and its functions. Number 4, adding participants. Number 5, how to create layouts. Number 6, pods. Number 7, audio tools. Number 8, using visual tool functions. Number 9, recording. Number 10, templates. Number 11, polling. And finally 12, the summary, which is the top 10 things to consider for your webinar. We will start off the seminar by asking the question, what is a webinar? A webinar is basically a seminar presented over the internet through live streaming or through audio in real time. When I say real time, I mean that it's live at a certain place during a specific time. It's very much like a traditional seminar, but instead you don't have to be there in present. You can just be online. Webinars are very interactive. During a traditional seminar, you may have a room capacity of 20 or maybe 50 people, depending on the room it's being held in. On the other hand, for a webinar, you can invite one person or you can invite as many people as you wish. It is very interactive, meaning that each of the people taking part can have the opportunity to be engaged within the webinar, such as asking questions. People can be part of the webinar anywhere in the world, since you're using a computer. For example, I may be in New York, somebody may be in Europe, and someone else might be in Australia. No matter where you are in the world, you're able to log on and be part of this real-time seminar that's taken place. Please note that you should be aware of the difference in the date and time depending on the time zone you may be in, depending on the country and where the seminar is taking place. Webinars allow for accessibility, So you don't have to be at one place physically. You can be at the convenience of your own home, on vacation, or even at the coffee shop. And you can still attend a webinar. One of my favorite aspects is that it caters to the 21st century learner by using technology for many ways. It allows for using many of the tools of a computer and the functions to do many unique things, which we'll be looking at more closely when using Adobe Connect. To engage in conversating, collaborating with ideas, and the sharing of resources. Just like a traditional seminar, the webinar is the exact same. You have an organizer, a speaker, and an audience. These are all the parts that make up a webinar. But with a webinar, there are a lot of different capabilities with it. For example, we're able to hear people in different forms. They can speak through the chat and audio functions, or even through a telephone connection, which is an option available for you to connect. We can view slides, documents, and pictures with all of the participants of the webinar. We can interact and collaborate with everyone by asking questions. Participants can also share programs, slides, documents, images, movies within the Adobe Connect webinar session. In order to start a webinar, you must have the essentials. Some of the essentials are a computer. You definitely need some type of microphone. Usually the computer will have a built-in one. If not, you can use a headset, and that's fine. Speakers are a must. Some of them may be built in within your computer, or you can get external ones. You definitely need internet connection, and it should be high-speed internet connection, because you don't want there to be a lag time or a slow process when the webinar is going on. You may not be able to keep up with the actual webinar session. A high-speed connection is a must, and you need to know the date and time of the webinar so you're not late. And last but not least, you need a webcam to allow others to see you in the online forum, especially if you are the presenter. You may need an external one if it's not built in your computer. There's one big don't, and that would be to ensure that you are not downloading or streaming through other sites while conducting your webinar. This will slow down your whole process, and there may be some freezing, a lag time of chats or discussions which can occur throughout the webinar. Don't do live streaming or downloads if you want to have a successful webinar. Within a webinar, we want to make sure it's relevant, impactful, and memorable. And to do these things, it all depends on the presentation or delivery of your webinar. The main focus is keeping your audience engaged. A necessary aspect of a webinar is the hook. How do we hook our audience? We can do this in many ways. First, we can actually have the audience engage through humor, or through engaging icebreakers, or through a thinking question in your welcome message. We want to stimulate their minds and have them gain some interest into what your presentation will be about. When creating your webinar, you must prioritize your key messages that you are trying to promote or you're wanting the audience to come away with. Make sure it's meaningful. If it's meaningful, it'll be useful and effective to all participants. The information must be relevant to what the participants want to know and want to hear, and how it can be useful for them. We also want to ensure that there's active participants. So having the audience engaged through chat sessions, questions to think about, or using a poll is allowing them to be interactive within the webinar. If you set up your webinar, you may not choose to use a webcam, but if you don't choose to do so, it's always a good idea to have a picture of yourself or your face so the audience can connect with the voice that's being heard throughout the webinar. Using visuals is a must. Visuals are key and must be used throughout the webinar. Any type of visuals are fine. This can be done by incorporating graphs, movies, and templates. These are just some, but you can add as much different variety of things as you wish. Visuals will allow the audience to stay engaged, to keep them motivated, and allow them to see the relevance by making connections through the visuals. It is also great for individuals with various learning abilities. Visuals may help participants stay focused because it's easy to get distracted. Overall, it keeps them engaged and focused. Sharing a story is always a great idea. You can take whatever key messages and ideas that your webinar entails and throw it in a story, which allows the participants to see the effectiveness and the meaningful approach towards your key ideas. A real experience, for example, may be something you want to include within your webinar. Try to implement a story to give it an appeal and allow the participants to be impacted by it. I would like to share a story of my own. I did a webinar on technology and how it supported the success of students due to a large population of English language learners in a school community. There was a huge need for this webinar as funding was being allotted for various items in the school. Technology tools such as netbooks, iPads, software apps, and the use of online learning platforms were the big items on the list, noted by teachers, parents, and students. I needed to still do some convincing to the instructional resource teachers, administrators, and superintendents. So I conducted my own webinar using Adobe Connect, directing it to essentially catering to the needs of all learners using differentiated instruction to promote success in a multitude of aspects. My approach was clear and concise, simply allowing everyone in my webinar to see how technology enhanced and provided opportunity for alternate forms of communication, application, and creativity. By discussing the various forms of learning through the use of many technology tools supported with data that demonstrated success and growth, many realizations became apparent through the questions and comments being posted. Using Adobe Connect webinar platforms to demonstrate how one technology piece builds on another made the participants understand the easy formats and approaches that were conducive to promote successful learning environments. To have them understand more about the topic, I allowed them to be more engaged in the topic through the participation of the tools, from uploading content to being live on a webcam within the Adobe Connect platform. Once the participants were provided with the opportunity to participate, they became engaged and wanted to learn more. Teaching through the lens of a participant with limited knowledge on the practicality and differentiation strategies allowed me to provide a meaningful webinar. It created structure for critical thinking, for cooperative learning, for co-learning via sharing inputs, processes, outcomes in codifiable ways, looking back, looking forward. The overall message here is that we're all lifelong learners. No matter how much we know, there's a wealth of knowledge out there as research continues to be conducted. People want to learn. As leaders, we must support participants by being a participant and asking questions, conduct surveys ahead of time, and get an idea of the needs and wants within a webinar, as well as making it applicable to the types of learners attending it. We must remember, when creating a webinar, we must create a script. When creating the script, it helps us to stay focused and organized. We also have to make sure that we review the script. so that we know what we're talking about, and if questions arise, we are able to answer them. Keep rehearsing, as it will allow you to be more prepared and you'll feel more comfortable with doing your webinar. Participants are important within your webinar. Pause and ask questions. By allowing the audience to share their thoughts and ideas makes them feel like they're part of the community. Allow them time to provide feedback, comments, or questions. Allowing this to happen will keep them engaged and build a community of learners. Overall, we want to encourage, inspire, strengthen, and brighten the experience of everyone. We want to create an overall great impression of the webinar to the audience by making them feel part of it, by having them leave with something meaningful, and to want them to come back to see another webinar that you may create. Sum up your thoughts and ideas with your concluding statements. We will now look at Adobe Connect, which is a platform we will be using to set up our webinar. And when we set up our webinar, there are a few different steps that need to be taken. Right now, we are at the Adobe Connect homepage. I was sent a URL from Adobe Connect when I registered, so I just cut and pasted the URL into my browser, which brought me to this page. I'm going to enter my username, which is my email address, I'm going to then enter my password, which was given to me by Adobe Connect when I signed up. Before I press login, there's a link here to forget. If you forgot your password, you can click on that link. And there's also another box here if you want to have the program remember your username so you don't have to type that in every time you log in. As an administrator, I'm the one in charge of the webinar that I'm conducting. I will also be able to assign participants a password for them to sign in to my webinar. When invites are given by the administrator for guests, they will have a different type of login area. This is what it can look like. There is a little button here that says enter as a guest. They can enter their name and enter the live room. When they enter the live room, the administrator will be able to see that guest and allow them access. Or they can also enter with a login and password. If they enter with a login and password, they will be in the session without any hassle. There are options given in Adobe Connect for you to invite guests and allow them access. Once they log in, they would click enter room and they would be in the webinar session. There's a little box here that says remember username. This will allow you to have the program remember your username by clicking on this little box so you don't have to enter it over and over again as you log in. As an administrator, once I click login, I will be in a new screen which looks like this. Participants will also have a screen similar with limited access. If you have not given them access to a meeting, when they click on meetings, for example, there will be nothing there. As you can see, there are many tabs above: home, content, training, meeting, event management, reports, administration, and my profile. Right now we're going to focus on meetings. I will click on the meetings tab. As you can see here, I have 2 meetings already created. We are now going to create a new meeting from scratch. To do this, we need to click on New Meeting. We have a bunch of different things to enter in. First, it says name. We have to give our meeting a name. It should be applicable to what your webinar is going to be about. I'm going to create a name that's called Adobe Connect. The next line states custom URL. This is a unique URL given to your webinar. You may choose to give this link to your participants so they may enter the chat room. But in order to make it unique, you have to enter the last piece of information. We need to create a name or some sort of ending to the URL. You can name it whatever you'd like. I'm going to name it Adobe Connect. You may choose to write a summary of what your webinar is about. I'm going to choose to leave it blank. The next line tells us our start time and date. We can also add and change the duration of how many minutes the webinar will be. There are also 3 shared templates that you may use when you're uploading your content. This is given by Adobe Connect. You may choose your language that you want your webinar to be held in. And you can also use the access points on how you want your participants to enter the chat room. First, we have only registered users may enter the chat room. Guest access is blocked. If I click on this tab here, the participants that are registered will enter the chat rooms. Anyone trying to enter as a guest will not be able to link into the webinar. The second one here is only registered users and accepted guests may enter the room. This will allow guests and registered participants to enter the room. This is done through the link that's sent out by the administrator. If guests decide to enter the room, the administrator gets notification and has the leverage of allowing them to enter or not enter. The final button here allows anyone with a URL to enter the meeting room, whether it be a guest or an active participant within the webinar. For this meeting, I'm going to use the middle tab. Only registered users and accepted guests may enter the room. In terms of the audio conference settings, I'm going to click on Do not include any audio conference with this meeting. You may wish to use a telephone conference, which is not part of Adobe Connect, or you can choose to use the built-in audio functions that Adobe Connect offers. Since we're not using any audio conference with this meeting, we don't need to enter any of this information here, and we can just click on Finish. Now you can see that our meeting is set up and we have our unique URL. I can highlight this URL and email this URL out to all the participants that are attending my webinar. I can also click on the Enter Meeting Room to get right to the meeting in Adobe Connect. As an administrator, guests will not be able to click on this tab unless they log in. Instead of me cutting and pasting the link to enter the meeting, I'm just going to click on Enter Meeting Room. It is going to load and bring us to a new screen that's outside of the browser of Adobe Connect. This is our new screen for our meeting. This is a default screen that Adobe Connect provides for people using the webinar functions. This default page will allow us to do and create any type of webinar. The first thing I want to do is upload some sort of content. The middle image here allows us to upload things like movies, pictures, PDF files, PowerPoints, etc. Let's try it out. I'm going to click on the arrow button where it says Share My Screen. I can share my screen, I can share my documents, or share things on the whiteboard. First, I'm going to share something from my documents and upload it to our meeting. I'm going to click on Browse My Computer and look for the file that I want on my hard drive. Once I found my file, I'm going to click on Open, and it should upload momentarily. It may take a while depending on the speed of your computer. As you can see, it has uploaded. Since we have our file for our meeting that we'll be discussing, I would now want to make sure that there's audio. I'm going to move my mouse all the way up to the audio button. I'm going to click on the drop down button and click on Connect My Audio. You're going to get a little box that shows up. It'll only show up one time once you set up your webinar. And I'm going to click Allow. Once you click on the Allow button, it gives access for audio to be heard from the administrator to the participants, vice versa. We want to make sure that it's working. And how do we know it's working? We can tell it's working by looking at the icon. The more I speak, I can see a sound wave moving. Also, the microphone is lit up in green. If by any chance your audio tool is not lit up in green and the box does not come up, you can check to see if the sound and audio is working on your computer. To do this, you'll have to click on the Meeting tab. You'll then click on the Audio Setup Wizard. This will take you through some steps to see if your computer is configured. Now we want to see if our webcam is working. I'm going to move my cursor to the button that says Start My Webcam. I will click on it and my face appears. I don't want my people to see my face as I'm speaking into the webinar, so I'm going to click on my image here and press this button, which will pause it. Now the only image that they can see is my face that's in a still picture. Please note that when we started the meeting, everything that we were doing within the meeting, such as uploading and adding my webcam as well as looking at the audio tools, is being shared with the participants if they had entered the room. I stated earlier that I wanted to pause my webcam because I didn't want the audience to see me speak. I wanted them to see a still image. Now I don't want the audience to see what I'm doing. I will go and click on Stop Sharing. This tab, once I click it, will bring me to the content page and allow others not to see how and what I'm setting up on my meeting screen. Note that when we're on this default screen and I click on Share My Screen, whatever I click on, any of the hosts or participants can see it. One thing to note, when you do click on Share My Screen, a box will pop up and it's another add-on. You must allow the add-on to occur and to download. This will allow you to share your screen successfully. When I click on Share My Screen, I get many options. I can share my desktop or share applications or share windows. I'm just going to share maybe an application that's running currently, which is my mobile internet stick. I'm going to click on that and I'm going to click on Share. So automatically my screen has moved to my Mobile Connect screen share as well as my Screenomatic website page that I'm working on my browser. The screencast page was already on, that's why it appeared, but select what you want the audience to see when you're sharing your files or applications or desktops. I'm back on my Share My Screen page. Now I want to go back to the original document that we shared earlier. I'm going to click on the drop down. I'm going to go to Recently Shared and go to the page that I uploaded, which was Rates and Ratios. I would like to invite more participants to enter our webinar. To do this, I would click on Meetings, then I would click on Manage Access and Entry, then I would click on Invite Participants. Here, I will get my unique link. I would then copy this link and I can email it out, or I can compose an email within Adobe Connect and send it out to participants that are not currently logged on and invite them to my webinar. I'm just going to click on Cancel. But when I do see the participants, they will be listed under the participants column here, and we can see how many participants will enter the webinar by their names. Once participants are entering the room, you can click your microphone on. It's green, so I know it's on, and you can also start your webcam, and you can click on Stop Sharing and pause it so you have a still image depending on what you want to share during your webinar process or setup. With my webcam, I can hold audio chats, or I can also hold chats in the chat room by typing in the chat box located here, and I can see other respondents from the candidates when they use the chat function as well. If your webcam was on and you did want to stop it, you can stop at any time by clicking the stop button here. Essentially, we have all our components for a meeting. Now I want to stop the meeting. I'm going to click on Meeting. I'm going to click on End Meeting, and a dialog box shows up. I can write a message here thanking everyone for attending the meeting. You can change accordingly as you wish. I can click Save Message, or I can click OK, and now the meeting has ended. Hopefully you've gained insight into ways of creating a quick meeting with the main components. I relogged in and I'm back at my home page. Now I want to go to the same meeting that we were just in. I'm going to click on the Meetings tab here. I'm going to find the meetings that we were just in, which was Adobe Connect. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to enter the meeting room. It's going to load. It's almost there. Now I can see my PDF file that was uploaded, and this is the layout that we had set up for the meeting we started. Now, as a host, they have many privileges. They are the creator and the administrator. They can set up meetings, they can invite guests, add content, share and change layout, etc. As a presenter, they can share content that's in the meeting room, and they can share items from their computer as well as from their screens. So they don't have as much privileges as the host. The participants, on the other hand, have the least amount of privileges. They can view content, see, hear, and chat. As a host, if you want to give participants more privileges, you can do so. Once they are logged in and they appear under the participants column, you can actually drag their name and maybe perhaps make them a presenter or even a host. Once you do that, they have the privileges that a normal host or presenter would have. We're going to look at the Meeting tab and the functions of the Meeting tab. When I click on the Meeting tab, the first function says Manage Meeting Information. If I click on that, it brings me back to my home page. Once I'm in this tab, I can edit information, edit participants, add invitations. I can edit my content. You name it, you can do it. If I click on the content section here, I can add new content by clicking new content, and I can actually upload any sort of video files or PowerPoints or JPEGs to the content area, which you can use when you're sharing your webinar. You can use that to be uploaded, and perhaps you may be using a video, for example, within your webinar. This is a place where you can upload it. If you did upload a video, you can actually give your custom URL to your participants, and they can use that link to view the video, perhaps in a separate browser. I'm going to click on meetings. I'm going to go back to our original meeting that we created. I'm going to enter the meeting room again. I'm going to wait for it to load. I'm going to click on the meeting tab above, then click on the second function button, which is Manage Access and Entry. This allows you to invite participants into your webinar, block guests, block incoming attendees, place participants on hold, or auto-promote participants to presenters. So it allows you to manage the participants and guests within the webinar. The next function here is Change My Role. I can change my role from the host to the presenter or participant. It's up to you whether you choose to use one of those roles. The next tab here is Preferences. This basically allows you to change your setup and preferences of your webinar. There's many things you can do here: display name, audio conference, video, adjusting your microphone, screen share, etc. It's totally your choice. It's up to you if you want to make those changes. When you do so, you can click on Done. I'm going to click on Cancel because I didn't make any changes. The next tab here is Audio Wizard Setup. This allows us to look at our audio devices to make sure that they're running smoothly and they're working. I'm going to click on Next. This allows us to ensure our speakers are connected and we can play the sound to see if there is actually some volume and that our sound is working. And I played the sound and it is working. I'm going to click Next. You can also broadcast your audio using Adobe Connect. You can choose your recording devices below. I just have a microphone. I don't have anything else, so that's the only thing going to be listed. I'm going to click on Next. Here you're allowed to see if your microphone's working properly, if it will record. So I can click on Record. Hello, hi, how are you? I can see the blue moving, so I know it's recording. I'm going to click on Stop. I can play the recording. I'm going to click on Stop Recording and go to the next. This also detects the background noise. So if you are in a silent room, this will not pick up anything. If I click Test Silence, it will test it for you. I'm going to click on Next. We have finished our audio setup. Everything is adjusted here. It tells us the specs of everything. I'm going to click on Finish. Now I'm going to go back to the Meeting tab and look at the next tab, which says Record Meeting. The Record Meeting tab will basically record your webinar the minute you click on it. You can actually go back and click on the recording and use it for future use. If I click on Switch to Prepare mode, screen turns a bit blue and your Prepare mode tells you what's happening. It states you are now in Prepare mode. This allows you to view and edit layouts without interfering with the presentation. Changes made to the active pods will be reflected to the participants, so the participants will be able to see the changes. I'm going to click back to the Meeting tab. I'm going to end the Prepare mode, so we can stop it as well. The next tab here is Full Screen. I can make my webinar a full screen. If I click on it, I can click on the End Meeting tab to end the meeting, which we've done already, and I can also click on exit Adobe Connect, which will exit from the Adobe Connect homepage and have us log out. I'm back to my homepage. Now I would like to add participants to a specific meeting. Since I'm an administrator, I'm going to click on the Administration tab. Once I'm in the Administration tab, I am going to click on Users and Groups. Below you will see the various users and group functions that Adobe Connect provides for us, such as administrators, authors, training, event managers, learners, meeting hosts, etc. If you want to add specific permissions to an assigned person, then you can do so. So for example, if I add a participant and I want them to be a host, I can give them that permission by clicking on host. Right now, we just want to add a new user. I will click new user. Then it brings up a new user information profile. I will fill in the information of the participant. I will make a new password and retype the password. At the bottom it says email the new user account information, login and password. I want them to get that login and password information. There's also a prompt which will allow them to change their password after the next login. That way they can change a new password which I wouldn't know. Right now I'm going to leave that box unchecked. I'm going to click on finish. Now a link has been sent to their email in regards to the information about their login. I've created their profile. Now I want to add them to a meeting. I'm going to click on meeting. I'm going to click on the specific meeting I want them to enter. I'm going to click on edit participants. I see that they're listed under users and groups because I've created their contact. Now I want to assign them as a participant. I'm going to click on their name and click on add. Now they are a participant. I will now click on the Invitations tab and click on Send. This will send their invitation and provide them with the URL to attend this specific meeting. I have also received the URL link that they will receive to enter the meeting. I have cut and pasted the link into this new URL browser to show you what their screen will look like. As you can see, they have access to the meeting with limited permissions and options. If I wanted to set permissions, I would go back to Meetings, click on the meeting, click on Edit Participants, click on their name, scroll down, set user roles, and it gives me permissions as to what I want them to have. We are now going to look at the Layouts tab, which is above. Right now, we have a default layout set up by Adobe Connect. This layout that we have is called the sharing layout, and it's organized by the different pods. We have a discussion layout. I can click on that and our layout changes. I can also click on the collaboration layout and our layout changes as well. Depending on your webinar, you can create layouts that suit your topic of the webinar. Layouts give you a structure and flow to your webinar. I'm just going to click back on sharing to our original default layout. On our default setting, I'm going to click on layout, and there is a tab that says create a new layout, so I can adjust my layout the way I want it to look like. Before we do that, as you can see, there are the 3 standard layouts by Adobe Connect. We know which layout we are in. As it's stated above, it says Adobe Connect sharing. I am going to create a new layout. I'm going to click on create new layout, and a screen pops up. With this screen, I have a few options. When I create my layout, I am creating different pods, and we'll go into more discussion about what a pod is. Right now, let's consider it as sections that we can add to our layout. The options here are as follows. We have create a new blank layout, or we have create duplicate layouts that are given and shared by Adobe Connect. If I click on duplicate layouts and click on the scroll button here, I can see the 3 standard layouts by Adobe Connect. If I want to create a new layout, I will click this little button here to create a totally new blank layout. I can also enter my name of my new layout. I will call it Adobe Connect 1. I will then press OK. We are given a blank screen. I'm going to click on the Pods tab, and I'm going to add specific sections I want for my webinar. Once again, you have the option of creating how you want to design your webinar. I'm going to click on Notes, and I'm going to add a new Notes tab or pod. The notes have shown up, and I can readjust it by sizing it to the way I want as well. And I'm going to make it smaller, and instead of notes, I want to change the title. I'm going to call it Welcome Message. I'm going to click on the notes, title there, and type in Welcome Message. So you have the option of changing the titles of the pods. I'm going to click the box and type in a welcome message. Now, there are other functions above, just like Microsoft Word. You can change the font size, change it to bold, italicize, or underline. You can also change the font color, and you can add bullets. I'm going to add a second pod. I'm going to click on pod, and now I want to add an attendees pod. It's overlapping. I'm going to move it, and once I'm here, I can see all the attendees that are participating within the webinar. I want to add a third pod by clicking pod, and I'm going to add a chat pod. This way I can see all the people that are going to be in the chat room. They'll be listed here, and if I want to chat, I would click on the box and enter a message. Now during this webinar, you have the different layouts depending on what you're presenting. As you can see on the side, I have my sharing layout first, my discussion layout, my collaboration layout, and my Adobe Connect 1 layout, which I just created. These layouts allow different interaction within the structure of the webinar. For me, I created this layout as an introduction layout so attendees can see the welcome message and perhaps add a welcome message to it. I want to now change the order of my layouts since this is the first layout I want to appear. I'm going to click on layouts, and before I do that, I can see the sharing, discussion, collaboration, and Adobe Connect layout, the order that it will go in, that the attendees will see. I'm going to click on Manage Layouts. Here, once again, I see the order of it. I'm going to click on Adobe Connect 1. I'm going to use the arrow button and move it up because this is the first layout I want the attendees to visit. I can also rename it if I like, or I can delete it. But I want to keep it, and I'm going to click on Done. Now, when the attendees come in, they're going to see the Adobe Connect layout as the first layout. When I want them to do some sharing, I will have them click on the sharing layout. Then we can have our sharing discussion piece within this layout. Remember, for each layout, you can change or add pods or delete them as you wish. You can also have them in any specific order as you wish. And you can also change the names of your pods. If I didn't want attendees, the name here, I can click on it and it will give me an option to change that name. I'm going to go back to the Layouts tab. I'm going to click on Manage Layouts again. Here, I can also rename again in the sense of I want to add perhaps the allotted time for that specific layout, so the attendees know how long they'll be attending that session or layout. So I can click on the layout that I have and rename it. I can perhaps list it as 10 minutes. I'm going to click on Done, and now the candidates will know that this webinar session for this discussion piece will take 10 minutes. The last two pieces of the Layout tab is the Reset Layout function. You can, if you've made changes to the layouts, this will reset and go back to the default settings. Finally, we have the Close Layout bar. This will close out your layout and end the session within the layout. We're now going to look at the Pods tab. I'm going to click on the Pods tab here, and a drop down falls. It gives us all the different options within a pod. We already used a pod when we started the creation of our webinar. Basically, a pod contains interactive activities and functions that make up the layout for your meeting rooms. The host can add, delete, and change these pods. These pods are used for those that have permissions to add them to the webinar. The host will have access to these different pods and sharing these pods. Those with permissions can also have these functions accessed within their webinar. Whenever I add a pod, it will change the layout. As you can see on our screen, we have 3 pods: video, the attendee pod, and the chat pod. The first function here is the share function, and it gives us the option to add new share. With this function, we can add anything that we've shared or uploaded from our computer, whether it be documents, PowerPoints, images, videos, whatever you have and you'd like to share. This will create a new pod. The next pod here is notes. We can add a notes pod or add notes that we already have made, and you can edit those pods. The next pod is the attendees pod. There's a check mark there because we already have that pod accessible to us. Following that is the video pod. That's also check marked because we have that intact within our webinar as well. The next one is called the chat. We can add a new chat, or we can add an older chat that we've used in a previous webinar. Files. By adding the files pod, you can have the attendees access and share their own files. We have web links. You can have this as a pod where the attendees or hosts can share different web links. The polling, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a bit. We can add a new poll, and we started with the polling at the beginning of the webinar. The Q&A tab, we can have that for questions and answers as a pod. The next pod here is move and resize pods. We've already done that, and you can actually manage your pod sizes by changing the size of it. And the last tab here is manage pods. Once again, you can actually change the layouts and titles and names. And this is what the manage pod screen looks like. Here I can click on my attendees, rename it or delete it, and I can click on done. We are going to now look at the audio tab here. There are 3 different functions for it. The first one here is microphone rights for participants. This allows the participants the rights to use the microphone to speak. If I click on it, you will then see a check mark added to it. The next one here is enable a single speaker mode. If I click on that, there's only a single speaker speaking at that present time. If I click on this one, it would also be check marked and a little star pops up on the microphone there, which tells us what's enabled. Finally, you have the third function here, which is audio conference setting. If I click on this, you can manage your audio profile to associate it with a specific meeting room if you want participants to have audio discussions. With the little speaker tab here, if I click on the drop down arrow, I can mute my speakers so I'm not heard, or I can adjust the speaker volume. So if I click on that, I can adjust it from high and low. I can click on OK. The next little button tab here we have is the microphone tab. If I click on this, I can connect it to my audio or select a specific microphone. I only have one microphone that's built into my computer. I don't have an external one, so only the one is going to show up. And I can also connect it to my audio, and that means it's being recorded and you can hear me as I speak. I'm going to click it off. We're going to look at our webcam tab. I'm going to click on the drop down. The first function here is start my webcam. This will automatically have your webcam start to run and you will be live. You can also select a camera, such as an integrated webcam where you can share your screens and have it integrated within your pods. You can also have and enable the webcam for the participants so they can actually see what's happening. And they'll also have the function for them to access their own webcam so we can see them. The last tab here allows many different options when attendees are in the chat session. It's symbols associated with what they want to happen or occur, or if they want to state something. So there's many different functions here, as you can see, and it has great visual icons that they can use. We are now going to look at just some of the tool functions that are available for us to use in terms of visual aspects. I'm going to click on this arrow, which is a pointer. This allows me to point and give direction to certain sentences, for example, that I want the audience to see. I can also click on the draw button. This allows me other visual functions that I can use to make changes to my document. I have a pencil tab. I can click on that. It gives me a pencil where I can write, or a highlighter. I'm going to click on the highlighter and I can highlight specific things I want the audience to see. This tab here allows me to delete whatever I've selected. This tab here allows me to enter text. Supposing I want the audience to note something else, I can click on the text. It will give me a text box to put wherever I want it to, and I can add anything here. So I'm going to say hello. I can undo anything that I've done, just like a Word document, by clicking this undo tab. I can change the fonts, the size of the fonts, as well as the color. You may even choose to add shapes by clicking on the shape button. I can click on different shapes or symbols, and you can also color them in or add the border to it, whatever you like. One great way to use this function is by going back to the pod section. I can click on the share tab and add new share. By doing this, I can bring up a new screen and allow the audience to use something interactive. I can click on share my screen, the drop down arrow, and click on share whiteboard. This will allow those visual tools that I just showed you to be used here. You can use this as a welcome message, or for the attendees to state their interests or likes. It's up to you how you want to use that tool. I will just click on the text box here and I'm going to add this note stating it's an introduction page. It's a great way for the attendees to play around, be interactive, and once again, engage in some sort of activity. It can allow for very visually appealing styles and catering to those learning abilities. We are now going to look at the recording function, which is located in the Meeting tab. I'm going to click on the Meeting tab, then look for Record Meeting. I'm going to now click on Record Meeting. A box will pop up and it will allow us to give us options to create a name for the recording. Right now I'm going to leave it the way it is. It says Adobe Connect _0. We must always allow for recording because it gives us access to the recording later for those that perhaps never were able to attend the meeting, and it's a good way to archive all of our recordings so we have it for future use. I'm not going to add anything for the summary because I don't want to add what the webinar is about. I'm going to click OK. We are definitely in record mode, and we know this because the red light appears. This is stating that the meeting session is being recorded. If by any chance you wanted to stop the recording, you would go back and click on the red button. It would give us the option for pause or stop recording. I would like to pause the recording. Once again, it also gives us the option of resume recording or stop recording. The recording function is very easy to use. When we want to stop the total meeting, we would go back to the Meeting tab and then click on End Meeting. In order for us to retrieve this recording, we'd have to go back to our original home screen, where we initially used our username and password to log on. I've actually gone in and logged back in, and every time you log in, it brings you to the home screen. I want to go back and click on Meetings. When we look at our meetings, we can see all the webinars that we've created. We want to retrieve the recording for the session we just used. I'm going to click on the meeting that I want, which is Adobe Connect. I'm going to click on that. It gives us a lot of different information here, such as edit, information, edit participants, invitations, upload content, etc. A lot of these features do contain advanced settings. So right now we're looking at the basics. We want to click on the Recordings tab to retrieve our recording. I can see that there is a recording called Adobe Connect. I can also see that its access is private at the moment. The recording date. Unfortunately, there's no current duration due to it being uploaded and it's probably processing right now. It would always tell you how long the video is. I will show you what this could look like by going to another recording. I'm going to click on Meetings. I'm going to click on Webinar. This is something I did earlier. I'm going to click on Recordings. And as you can see, the duration is stated. I can do a couple of different things with the recording. If I click on the box here, I can either delete it or move it to another folder or give it a specific access type. I'm going to click on access type. Here I can allow it to be public or just keep it private. I'm going to keep it private. I'm going to click on Save. I can also click on the box again and click on Move to the folder. This tab here allows me to move the recording to a specific folder of my choice through My Content, Shared Content, or through User Content, depending on how you would like to share your recordings to the attendees. I'm just going to click on Cancel. I'm now going to click back on the Meeting tab, and I'm going to quickly discuss templates. In this folder here, we have 3 standard templates that Adobe Connect provides for us, or I can create my own template in terms of what I have available to me. I may choose to use my Adobe Connect layout as a new template that I want to use for future use. I would then want to move this layout to my templates folder. I'm now going to click on the Move tab, and it brings us to a new screen. It says here My Templates, and it also says Move. Once I click on Move, it will be stored as My Templates under that folder. I'm going to click on Move, and it says the move was successful. I will now press OK. When I press OK, it brings me back to the Meetings tab. I can also make one of my layouts a template for everyone to see and to be shared. I can do this by clicking on the layout that I want to be shared. I'm going to click on this one. I'm then going to click on Move. This time I'm going to move my file to the Shared Templates by clicking on Shared Templates. I'm going to click on Shared Templates and then click on Move. A warning pops up letting us know that this file will be shared and it will not be private anymore. It's just giving us that additional information. I'm going to click OK. And the move was successful. It's been shared to everyone that's attending my webinar in the shared folder. You can see that it's removed from the list. I'm going to click on New Meeting. I'm going to scroll down a bit, and here you can see the Select Template. If I click on it, you can see the templates that I decided to share, and that's available for everyone to use. I can choose to click on it if I wish, and it says Webinar, so I know that's the one I've added. I have brought us back to our original webinar where we started. We're now going to talk about a little bit more about polling. It's a way to make your webinar interactive, interesting, and engaging for your audience. To start off, we will click on the Layouts tab. I want to create a blank layout, so I'm going to click on Create Layout and then create a blank layout. It's going to be called Layout 1, and I will press OK. I only want to see the polls that I create, therefore I don't need any other pods to view. I am not using any other forms of discussion, just focusing on the polls. I'm going to click on the Pods tab, and then I'm going to look for Poll. I'm going to add a new poll. The poll will allow the host or the presenter to engage the audience by perhaps making a survey of some sort to get the audience's feedback or interests. I'm going to click on Add New Poll. It gives us options as to what type of poll we want to create. We can have multiple choice, we can have multiple answers, or we can have short answers. I'm just going to create a poll with multiple choice questions. My question is, what is your favorite color? I will give some options. My first poll is created. I can change the size and direction, which I've stated earlier, by clicking at the end of the tab box and moving it. I've created my poll, which my audience can see if they're logged in. At this moment in time, the audience cannot see this survey because I haven't opened it yet. The minute I open the survey, this will allow the attendees to see it right away and to start answering the question. I have switched to an actual attendee screen. This is what they're seeing on their end. Host presenters are yet to set a poll. So right now, since I did not open the poll, they do not have access to it. I will now open up this poll on my end by clicking on Open, and our screen changes. I'm going to show you what the screen looks like for the attendee. I've switched back to the attendee screen. Now you can see the difference. they can also create their vote. I'm an attendee and I'm going to click on blue, for example. On my end, I can see the attendees vote. One person has voted with the number 1 on the right-hand corner, and it's 100%. I can view the votes by clicking on View Votes. I can see exactly who voted and who is online. I'm going to click back to the poll. I can click on Edit, and this will allow me to add more answers if I wished to the multiple choice questions given. I can also click on Broadcast Results, and this will broadcast the results to everyone. So the attendee will be able to see exactly what I'm seeing. I can also end the poll by clicking on End Poll. This will stop the polling from occurring and attendees will not have access to it. But I can also reopen it at any time by clicking on Reopen. Whatever I do on my screen while I'm sharing will be visible to the attendees once I open up the poll. Another neat function to this is that I can click on the pod options here and click on results. I can have the results be shown as a percentage, or shown as numbers, or shown as both. If you want the percentages to be shown, this will allow the attendees just to see the percentage, not knowing how many people actually voted. This way, if you have a low number of attendees that are doing the poll, no one will know. You can set up as many polls as you wish for the attendees to complete. Once again, you can click on View Votes and see all the attendees that are listed and that are attending this particular webinar. This is a great function because you can also see who is an active participant and who you may need to email or prompt to do a vote, for example. I will create one more poll. I'm going to click back to polling. And this time I'm going to use a multiple answer poll. My question is, what do you need for a webinar? I'm going to give some answers. And I'm going to open the poll. So this poll allows for multiple answers to be chosen. The attendees can vote as much as they want on the specific answers given. And if I once again broadcast the results, everyone can see the votes that are being placed by the attendees. Polling is definitely great for surveys, for data, for polling the attendees online, and even to promote quizzes. On a final note, I'm going to leave you with the top 10 things to consider when creating a webinar. Number 10, great impression. Reiterate the main points and ideas through a summary and concluding thoughts. You may also want to give the top 10 points to consider of your webinar. Number 9, active participation. Keep your audience engaged and allow for them to speak and share a voice through comments, feedback, and question periods. Number 8, rehearse. Have a script and practice your webinar. Number 7, share a story. Use a story as a minds-on activity to spark interest from the audience. Number 6, visuals. Add videos, images, templates, and other appealing artifacts that support your webinar. This will bring a vibrant atmosphere and keep the participants looking at their screens. Number 5, interaction. Use a poll tool to allow for interaction to take surveys. It's a great way to involve the participants in the webinar. Number 4, key ideas. State your ideas and prioritize them so the audience understands what focus and direction you're taking. Number 3, webcam picture. Use the webcam to show your identity or post a picture so that the audience can make a connection to the presenter. Number 2, hook the audience. Add humor, icebreakers, or thinking questions. Number 1, computer components. Ensure that you are running on a high-speed connection. Do not download or conduct any live streaming. Last but not least, I've left you with the time frames of each specific component of a webinar. Hope you enjoyed.